winter of 1948, tensions were building around Berlin. They would lead to a Soviet blockade of West Berlin and the Berlin airlift, one of the defining events of the Cold War.
The Soviet Union chose not to attend the San Moritz Games. They were tempted 4 years later for the ice hockey, but eventually decided to stay at home. The wartime Axis powers of Japan, Germany and Italy were allowed to go to the Oslo Games in 1952. There were some complaints and reservations, but in the end, the spirit of reconciliation won out.
3 seconds made all the difference, enough to give this German quartet of heavyweights the Olympic bobsleigh title.
The following Olympics, it was actually awarded to a former Axis power, Italy. The Games were held in Cortina d'Ampezzo, and this time, the Soviet Union decided to turn up. There had been a change in attitude towards international competition. Sport was no longer seen as an affectation of the capitalist bourgeoisie. Instead, they worked out that a physically fit nation would be a productive nation. And excellence in international competition would force the rest of the world to realise the superiority of the Soviet system. It wasn't an easy pitch. Certain promises had to be made. There was a concern that if Soviet athletes failed on the international stage, then that would be used by the Western media to throw mud at the entire Soviet project. And that meant that the chairman of the relevant government committee for sport, before entering any international competition, he had to write a personal note to Stalin here at the Kremlin, guaranteeing victory. Italy introduced a touch of slapstick to the opening ceremony, but then, with an altogether more stern-faced determination, the Soviet Union swept the top of the medal table with 7 golds, 3 silvers and 6 bronzes. They would then go on to dominate nearly every Winter Olympics for the next 40 years. Duncan Harper scored. Soviet Union have won this match. Vladimir Belousov of the Soviet Union, only 21. Seems to think he's done it. He seems to know he's done it. He has! The shift in international sporting power didn't go unnoticed. The American magazine Sports Illustrated said that the Soviets were casing Cortina like bank heisters planning a caper. And one US senator said there were 12 million professional Soviet athletes with their sinister eyes fixed on the 1956 Games. And they weren't there, he continued, to promote sportsmanship and fair play, but to increase international communist domination.
The Berlin Wall was about to go up. The Cold War was filtering into every part of society, including sport.
As in all wars, the sports war had its propaganda victories and defeat. The big star of the Games from the West point of view was Toni Sailer from Kitzbühel in Austria, known as the Blitz from Kitz. He won 3 gold medals in downhill, slalom and giant slalom. Less noticed in the West was Yevgeny Grishin from Russia. He won 2 gold medals in speed skating and smashed the world record.
The Games were getting more popular. In 1964, for the first time, the BBC would televise the Winter Olympics, and Britain would win its first and only gold medal in bobsleigh. Tony Nash and Robin Dixon, 3rd Baron of Glentoran. It was in a race that harked back to another era, and a victory for sportsmanship as their great rival, Eugenie Monti, offered to help them fix their faulty sleigh. It was, said Tony Nash, a magnificent gesture.
Did you know what you had to do when you left the top?
Oh, I knew what we had to do, yes, but doing it is another matter.
One of the key principles of the original Olympic Charter was that athletes should be amateurs. So how could it possibly be said that athletes that did nothing except train for their chosen sport, paid for by the state, were just doing it for the love of the game?
The Americans thought the Soviets were 100% professional. And since the president of the IOC between 1952 and 1972 was their very own Avery Brundage, born in Detroit, raised in Chicago, and ardently on the side of the amateurs, the battle to protect the Olympics against professionalism and commercialization was keenly fought, and would ultimately be lost.
It wasn't just the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc that were threatening the amateur code. The gentlemanly Christian alpine sport, so beloved of the Lunds, was becoming so popular by the 1960s that the commercial advertisers, those foot soldiers of capitalism, started paying attention.
Style, colours, the right anorak, and of course those eye-catching ski trousers. You can get your equipment for around £30.
The Alps had become the holiday choice for the great British middle class, and they left political correctness back at Heathrow.
If you're in a spot, someone will fly your egg, especially if you're sweet and helpless. It's so useful to have a man around, I'm sure you'll agree. And after all that, she's got something to chew on, too.
But the public loved no sports star more than a skiing star.
The dominating figure of these games has been, of course, Jean-Claude, the Frenchman whose appearance and performances have made him, in this country anyway, almost an Olympic god.
Enter Jean-Claude, winner of 3 gold medals in the 1968 Olympic Games.
I had to ski all out and to try everything I knew to really ski the fastest this mountain could be skied.
Obviously now you could relax and celebrate.
So now I can relax and drink champagne.
After his triple triumph, Killy advertised Chevrolet cars, Schwinn bicycles, United Airlines.
Do you know me? I won a few gold medals in the 1968 Olympics as an amateur. But skiing for me now is a business. And for that, I need an American Express card.
He had a deal with Head Skis. He went into movies, motor racing. The world loved the dashing Frenchman.
From skiing, triple Olympic champion and double world champion, Jean-Claude Killy. Killy with the first of his 5, and that will do very nicely, left-footed into the corner. And Killy delighted at that.
The bastion of amateurism, Avery Brundage, wasn't impressed.
The General Charles de Gaulle.
He shunned his medal ceremonies and threatened to cut skiing from the Olympic programme. The president of the IOC couldn't nail Killy or get skiing banned. By the time of the next games in Sapporo, Japan, he did make an example of the next skiing superstar, Karl Schranz of Austria. Schranz was ever happy to complement his skiing with commercial exposure. Avery Brundage now banned him from the Sapporo Games. It was all right for Austria, as their beloved Franz Klammer would take gold 4 years later at the Innsbruck Olympics.
Franz Klammer is only just 22, but in the blue ribbon of the Games, Klammer means as much to the Austrians as Killy did to the French in 1968.
Austrian skiing's finest moment.
There's the time, it's coming up now, 1:45, he's done it, Klammer's done it, and this crowd go wild.
Not much consolation for Schranz, though. Brundage retired in 1972, and after his presidency, the rules on amateurism were slowly dispensed with until they were pretty much got rid of altogether, although they do still exist for boxing and wrestling. But there would be one ultimate showdown in the winter of 1980 between those who believed in the amateur ideal and those who chose to ignore it. The Games were held in Lake Placid, New York State. Now, as ever with the Winter Olympics, the setting was incredibly dramatic, but the political background was also certainly not placid.